I'm going to start the recording. Welcome to the Faculty Friday. Faculty Friday is every Friday where we highlight both an area in terms of a discipline here on campus. And so for the first 15 minutes-ish or so, Abbie and any of other ed faculty, which I don't think I see any, there are so many people in the room, I'm not used to have to look through that long a list, talk about what education looks like here at A&M Texarkana, what folks do with the degree, where they end up, all those sorts of things. Also, a bit of why Abbie ended up in education, how that ended up happening, those kind of things. And I'll help you, Abbie, with questions if you're feeling like, I feel like I said what I needed to say.
Yeah.
Then we'll move into 15 or 20 minutes or so of the same kind of thing that we do on Who's Up Wednesday, which is sort of a get to know each other in a weird sort of way. I don't see Tyler in the room, so I think I can avoid both his question ball and his question oval. I'll ask a question. And then typically Abbie will answer, but everyone is included in it. And sometimes they're good questions and sometimes they're terrible. I will try to be more good than terrible. We'll see.
Okay.
Then the last bit, Abbie's going to spend some time talking about what she does in terms of her research, not in I'm going to read a conference paper type of style, but to say, here's how I do research, here's the interest, the things that I'm interested in, here's why I'm interested in them, and a chance to really get to know Abbie and her sort of scholarship intellectual side. So I will turn it over to Abbie to start with a soliloquy on what is education like at A&M Texarkana? What do people do? How does it work?
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much for having me here today. And yeah, so let's dig right in. One of the things that I think makes education unique from other disciplines, and obviously I'm very biased because this is my discipline, but it is that all of our students, whether they are seeking secondary certification to teach in a middle school or a high school, or they're seeking elementary education to teach in preschool or lower elementary grades, um, they are doing two things at the same time, working towards earning a bachelor's degree, which is awarded through the Higher Ed Coordinating Board in Texas A&M Texarkana here at our institution. And they are also working to gain that professional certification from the State Board of Education in Texas and the Texas Education Agency. So there's two competing interests that all of our teacher preparation students are working toward as they are completing that bachelor's degree. So that's very unique. And we have two basic options. I'll call them basic options for undergraduate students as they're looking at and considering teaching. You can go elementary or you can go secondary. And so if you go elementary education, then you would major in our elementary education degree. And everyone, regardless of whether they choose elementary or secondary, applies in their junior year. And that's really when they start the bulk of their educator preparation courses. If a student is interested in pursuing a secondary certification, then that student majors in the discipline in which they hope to teach. So history majors, English majors, science majors, biology, chemistry, math, all of those. If you want to teach anywhere from grade 7 to 12 in Texas public schools, then you basically make education your minor. It's not officially your minor at this institution, but that's sort of essentially how it works. We're actually in the middle of applications right now to the educator prep program. So if anyone is thinking about that, you take some education courses. You begin with Ed 311, which is the Foundations of Education, sort of an introduction and a very broad overview to what being a teacher is like. And then we have year-long residency programs. So your senior year, the intention is that you are out in public school classrooms in the area. The first semester, sort of on a part-time basis, is you're meeting students, working with your cooperating teacher, gradually taking over more responsibility, because with your classroom teacher, we use what's called a co-teaching model. Sometimes when people think about student teaching and they think about becoming a teacher, it might have been some of your experiences as you were going through school that you had a student teacher. And so what that might have looked like in the past was that the classroom teacher eventually just got up and left, and then the student teacher was sort of on their own. That's not the model we follow at A&M Texarkana, because we have found, lots of researchers have found, that co-teaching model works more more in the interest and the benefit to the students in the classroom and to the pre-service teacher. So it's really the benefit of having 2 teachers in a classroom to support all of the students learning, the pre-service teacher and the students that they are teaching. So you have the growth of one teacher under the tutelage of another teacher. So the cooperating teachers are really essential at this point because they are teaching their students that they have in their classroom in whatever discipline they're in, and they're also helping coach and teach and mentor that pre-service teacher from A&M Texarkana. So we have a very supportive and involved faculty here. I think that's pretty standard across this institution, but you get a lot of support as our students are working towards that educator certification. And so they also are, at the same time they're finishing up courses and taking classes, they're having to pass licensure tests for the state of Texas too. And so we do a lot of support in that area. And yeah, that's kind of the broad overview without really getting into the nitty gritty. So if there are any questions, anything that you guys want to know, please feel free to unmute and pop in. I'd love to answer those questions, but I also don't want to give you more details than you want.
I do have a question.
Mhm.
I transferred in. I'm a junior and I'm in the Education 311 class, and I haven't heard about the application that I need to apply for.
Which 311 section are you in? Who's your instructor?
Curry.
Oh, Miss Miller in our certification office will be coming to your class via Zoom, or maybe she'll be there March the 9th. So you're going to do the application process March the 9th.
Okay. All right. That makes me feel better. Thank you.
Yeah, we got you. She'll be there.
So you said that application is due March the 9th, or it starts March 9th?
No, that's the application. It closes March 15th, but you should have your application completed if you're in Miss Curry's section. If you're in Miss Foster's section, Miss Miller and I went to Miss Foster's Ed 311 section earlier this week and worked on applications and writing samples with all of her class. So if you're in Ed 311, the application will be complete before.
I'm a pure math major, and
yeah,
I'm looking to do the education route, but I'm looking to do the alternative route, and I want to know what's the deadline for that, because I'm not in any of the education courses.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good question. We do also offer an alternative certification program for folks who it makes more sense to get your bachelor's degree and then to work on your certification. So if you're interested in the ACP program, the deadline for application to that is May 16th. I'm sorry, it's May 16th. And we will actually have an informational session next Thursday. Nope, 2 Thursdays from yesterday, March the 11th. I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if you're interested in the ACP, if you would just send me an email and I'll send you a flyer with that. But the deadline is May 16th for the ACP, and we'll have an informational session March the 11th, and then we'll have another 2 informational sessions on April the 8th. So, but yeah, you have to graduate. If you want to do the ACP program, you have to graduate with a bachelor's degree. We start in the summer. It's a summer cohort. So you would start taking some online classes this summer if you're accepted for the 2021 cohort. So you start taking classes this summer, and after you meet the criteria to get into the program and take the classes this summer, then TEA will allow, and the State Board of Education will allow us to issue, or they will issue you an intern teaching certificate. So you can, once you're admitted into our program and have completed the coursework over the summer, you can look for a full-time teaching job. So you won't be uncertified. You'll have an internship certificate issued by the state, and you would be the teacher of record in the subject and content area, so math. And if you want to teach math in high school, you will have your selection of job offers, I promise. They always need great math teachers, all the districts. I get principals and superintendents emailing and calling all the time. Do you have a math teacher? Do you have a math teacher? So and most of the districts around here pay stipends. So you get your regular salary, whatever that is for that particular district. And most of the districts around here pay a couple extra $1,000s a year for high needs areas, which would be special education, secondary math, and science. So you have a lot of options if you're interested in doing that. But you would be completing your certification and going through your first year of teaching at the same time. Most of our courses are online for that program. We typically have, in summers past, we have had 1 or 2 classes that have had just a couple of face-to-face meetings, because we like you to be able to meet your cohort members. We go through the ACP program as a cohort, so you'll have the same people at the same time taking all of your classes together, and you'll also be going through your first year of teaching together. So we like to give you guys the opportunity to get together. That being said, we obviously did everything online last summer. And, you know, I don't have a crystal ball for this summer. I would probably going to be online. I mean, I don't know. But who knows anything anymore? But probably online again. So, which we do that because a lot of people that join the ACP program typically already have jobs that they're working in, and a good number of them, but not all, have families. And so they need to maintain that steady income, you know, just for a variety of reasons. So that's ACP. If you are pure math, please contact me, because you will not have a problem finding a job. I promise. Like, I don't feel bad. This is recorded and I'm telling you, I promise you will find a job. I'm not nervous about that in the least.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. What other questions do you have for me?
I have a question. I think for me, so I'm on my second semester of my junior year, and I'll enter my senior year, you know, this fall. I don't know what I need to have done before August. Like, over the summer, I know I'm going to have to take some tests and
yes.
Like,
have you taken?
Where is the information that I can get to say, okay, I'm here and this is where I have to be by August? Like, is there any kind of?
Yes, there is. We actually have our testing policy that is posted on our website. So if you go look at the handbooks, if you know where the education link is, if you go to case and then you click on education, and I'll send you a link in a little bit, it'll say the testing policy. And so the testing policy tells you when you should be taking all of your tests in order to be able to move forward. So have you taken, I'm pretty sure you're in the, I know you're in the TPP. Have you taken at least the PPR test?
No, I have not.
You have not taken any of those things. Okay, well, you need to email me. My email's in the chat.
Okay.
You need to email me, and we need to get you signed up for, there's a PPR workshop. It's April the 9th, I believe. So you need to get signed up for that PPR workshop. Your absolute best bet is take the PPR workshop in April, do the representative test, get released to take the PPR. And then I would suggest doing things just a slightly bit backwards, because in January of this year, the state of Texas decided that elementary educators, in order to get certified in Texas, need to be able to take and pass the science of teaching reading, which, you know, that makes sense. It's a research-based line of thought or school of thinking about how you teach people how to read. And as an elementary school teacher, that's critical. That's mission critical. And so I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a minute here, and then I'll step back off. But if I have a lot of students that tell me, oh, I want to teach preschool, or I want to teach kindergarten, or I want to teach first or second grade because I don't have to teach STAR, and I just love the little people. And that's awesome. We need people who love the little people. But if you want to teach any of those grades, not you in particular, just you as the generic person thinking about education, if anybody wants to teach those grades, you have to be a reading expert. I could go on my soapbox for a really long time, but if students are not, there is a large body of research that if students are not reading on grade level by 3rd grade, then their likelihood of being on grade level by 9th grade is cut in half. And if they are not on grade level in 9th grade, then their likelihood of graduating high school is cut in half. And it is that serious, because we can talk about the data that exists about earning potential and where people will be if they don't have at least a high school diploma in 2021, 2022, in the future moving forward. Their income earning potential is substantially lower. And the increase in education, just the statistics are there for exponential increase in wealth. And so, you know, it's nice that people like little kids and they want to go into education, but if you don't know how to teach people how to read with fidelity, then you don't have any business being in there. So I'm stepping off my soapbox now. Sorry. It's a huge predictor a student's futures and their success in school. And so we have to be passionate, we have to be dedicated, we have to be committed to student success. So in K-12 education.
Will you go over like when I need to take the science of teaching reading and all of that?
Yes.
Like,
well, so I would suggest that you do that this summer. Dr. Cordray has already, she's also started, and you can sign up for these too. Dr. Cordray has started offering science of teaching reading workshops. And if you're taking reading 350, she covers the bulk of the science of teaching reading in reading 350. So if you've taken Dr. Cordray, you're going to be prepared. She's also offering workshops. So I would do PPR first, try to get PPR finished before the end of the semester. In the first part of the summer, work on the science of teaching reading. And then you're probably going to want to move into your field-based semester in the fall. So you also need to get on TK20 if you're intending to apply for Ed 495, your field-based semester. You need to get on TK20 in the free part and fill out the notice of intent. I'm also having a lunch and learn March 16th about testing. So
I will be there.
Yeah, if you're in the TPP and this is too much to absorb right now, come to that lunch and learn. But if you're already in and you know that you want to do field-based teaching or your field-based semester in the fall, just go ahead and send me an email and let's get you started on that. It's not too early to start. It is never, if once you're admitted into the teacher prep program, you need to start thinking about testing, because you cannot move into your last clinical teaching semester without having passed all of your certification tests, because you can graduate from college absolutely without having passed your certification test, but the state won't license you without passing scores on all of that. So we have a support system and policies in place to help our students get there. Right, sorry. What other questions do you, I think I've gone over my limit because my soapbox took us off track a little bit.
We'll extend question time to the moon. I would add that ultimately, I think other departments, my own, will work hard for students, but no one will work as hard as education will to make sure that you guys are on track. I've sent countless people of my own majors who are also doing the quote unquote education minor. It's not really a minor. It's its own field of study. But there's a lot of dates and state requirements and here requirements. The education faculty, all of them, will answer your questions and guide you and help you and support you, but you have to ask. I can't suggest more highly writing down Abbie Strunc's email address right now. And anytime you have a question, they will guide you to where you need to go. It's just one of those things that they're serving a whole bunch of different masters between the state and A&M and this and that. And they know it. And it's kind of impressive to watch Abbie rattle them off. So I'm impressed, Abs.
Thank you.
Not surprised, but impressed all the same. Do folks have other questions? All right, before we move into the sort of larger question answer, I do have one question for you, Abbie. How did you end up doing, what was the moment in which you went, okay, education's my jam, it's my thing, this is what I'm going to teach?
Well, that actually happened in college for me. I started out, my mom suggested to me when I was a senior in high school that I would possibly make a really good teacher. And being the 18-year-old that I was, I didn't think my mom knew anything. So, you know, I think that's relatable. So I started college as a psychology freshman because I wanted to have a bachelor's in psychology and go to law school. And I learned over the first semester that psychology was probably just not the discipline for me. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It just didn't captivate me kind of the way that I thought it might. And it was in the process of changing majors a few times. So I am always an advocate when people come and they're first time in college students and they say, I don't know what I want to be. I feel you. I didn't know what I wanted to be either. So it's okay. But I was in a British history class and I loved the professor. I ended up taking 3 or 4 classes from him because he was just an amazing storyteller, and you could tell how much he loved the subject area. And I found that some of his love for history sort of, I don't know, I felt like I took it on a little bit. I can distinctly remember it all these years later, just how much I enjoyed that class and how much it made me appreciate history. So I switched to be a history major. And we had at my institution this thing called supplemental instruction. And so I became a supplemental instructor for the History 1301, essentially. And I loved it. And that's really when I realized that as I was helping freshmen and sophomores, my junior and senior year, understand history and learn about college and learn about the transition from high school to the university, I realized that I loved that. I loved teaching. I loved helping students sort of meet their goals and realize that history wasn't boring and that they could latch on to that. And so I started thinking about teaching as a profession, but I was one of those folks that was so close to the end of my bachelor's degree, it did not make sense to take another 33 hours to get my teaching certificate as an undergraduate. So I went the post-bac route, where I worked on a master's degree and my teaching certificate at the same time, and started teaching history in high school. And it was great fun. I ended up teaching world history, US history, and government economics. And that's really where I found that I just loved it. It was fun. I had a good time. So that's how I ended up in education. And the thing that I love about it is that I knew going to work every day, it wasn't necessarily, as much as I love the content, and I do love gov econ and history, but it wasn't so much about the content, it was about the impact that I had the opportunity to make for students. And quality teachers are so special to us. And it's not just quality teachers in that they love the content, because to me, a quality teacher loves the content and the students. And you have to have both, or it just doesn't matter. And so that's really where, in the course of my K-12 career, that I started thinking about pursuing my PhD, because I saw a lot of people in the classroom that either love the students but not the content, or they love the content but not the students. And I really just think my sort of focus, and I would even say moral compass at this point, is that as teachers, it's such a powerful position. It may not be the most well-paid position, but it's such a powerful position, and it has the opportunity to make such a difference and an impact on students' lives. And so if we go and we say that we love the students, but we don't teach them, if we don't teach them the content and help them find some sort of love and passion for the subject, even if they don't like the subject, like not everybody's going to come out and want to be a history, government, poli-sci major, whatever, but for me in particular, teaching seniors that were turning 18, a lot of them turned 18 the year that I had them, teaching them government and helping them understand how they could operate within that paradigm and within that as citizenry, because a lot of my students in high school where I taught were just really disassociated with it. The government wasn't something that they thought was relevant or even protective of them, because I taught in a majority high school that has over 4,000 students. And so there was a lot of disillusionment with the government. But for me, it was, how can I help them see how they can make a difference and how they can become active, even in a system that feels like it's maybe not set up for their success. And so you have to love your content, you have to love the students, and being able to move into teacher preparation. To me, I see what I do, even though I'm not in the classroom, in K-12 classroom with students anymore. I hope that the work that I do here helps produce and inspire students to go out and to love their students that they see in K-12 classroom, but also to help them want to teach the content, to help them, because, even in the elementary grade levels, like, it's awesome if you have a teacher that loves their students and is caring and kind and compassionate to them. But at the same time, if they're not caring and kind and compassionate to them and teaching them how to read and how to be successful in the society in which we find ourselves navigating, then that's not a quality teacher to me. So sort of how I got here.
Dig it. Awesome. Brilliant. Love it. Now we move into avoid the question ball / question oval. Now that Tyler's here, the threat is real. So the first question, and this is Abbie, certainly you can always say pass, and let the room answer. So I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but and the room can answer this as well. If you were asked to design your own float for the New Year's Day parade, think of the Tournament of Roses parade, what would be the unique feature of your float that would somehow signify you? What would be on your float?
Good question. Good. It would have to signify. Like, what's not cheesy to say here? By me, I don't know. Cheesy might be me, so I could go that route. It's okay.
Yeah, that's cheesy's fine. What would it be?
Cheesy's fine. I really think that. Oh yeah, let me think. Okay, I'm gonna pass for a minute, and then come back to me because I'm still trying to figure this out. Yeah. What would be on your float? What would be on my float? I mean, for sure, I'm gonna have a Blossom. That's my dog's name, by the way. So when I say Blossom, and you guys are like, "What are you talking about?" That there's definitely gonna have to be a Blossom on there in flowers, which would be appropriate. She's a pretty big deal in my life.
Mine, it would have dogs, clearly, but then it would also have all sorts of grains and barley, signifying booze. So dogs would be made out of all of the things that you make the very important booze with, and then probably also tobacco leaves.
Yeah. Oh, like Blossom would have to be made out of blossoms, obviously, like flowers, because that's my dog. I mean, I do have 3 kids. They're kind of important.
The kids didn't make my float. I just,
They're there. They're there. Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna go with the Blossom, and that sounds good. Yeah, that's my answer. I don't know.
Does anybody else in the room want to suggest what's on their float?
I was thinking whenever you asked an open book with the pages kind of in between, and you have different adventures in each book or each page, that's each gap that's open between the open book.
I mean, that's great.
I know. Like, when we do this often, Abbie, I'm like, oh no, wait, I want Kristen's answer now.
I'm like, she just put us to shame.
Is anybody else thinking of their float? They can either top or go underneath what Kristen just did.
Okay, I think that I would put the moon, because I typically follow the moon cycles, the new moon every 2 weeks, full moon every 2 weeks. So, how it's like a chorus, everything new is reborn again. So, yeah, I would just do the moon.
Okay. All right. To bail people out, now, if you had to design a float that Texarkana was entering in the Tournament of Roses parade, what is on Texarkana's float?
Ooh.
Yeah, I think you put the university on there.
But yeah, I think you have to put like the post office or something, at the Twin Cities downtown, something, because that's a big part of the identity of Texarkana, I think.
Could we put vultures on it now?
Yeah, I think they go right above the university because apparently they've moved in. I don't know what that's about, but it's funny.
Kristen, I saw you and did you want to say something? split the float in half. Oh, that's really good, Chandler. I like that. Have the two halves sort of coming together and pulling apart and coming together. I think symbolically is a perfect gesture. They have these sort of two floats that are sort of combining and moving apart as they move along, and would make the post office state line thing even more significant in that. What would be on the Arkansas side? Because I think we've said mostly Texas side stuff. Certainly there are Arkansas people in here, yeah?
Have to be.
Would it be all nature and hogs? Yeah.
Moving to Texas as soon as possible.
Deers on your float, Caleb. I like it. Right. I like, and people just moving, right. And when the floats come together, just people trying to migrate over to the Texas side. Poor Arkansas.
Sorry, I went to Washita Baptist for a few years, so I still mess with people about that.
Okay. All right, next question. When was the last time you laughed so hard you cried, and what was it about?
Well, it's always me. Like for me, it's always memes. Okay. My husband stockpiles memes. Like that's his new hobby. He stockpiles memes and it's usually like every couple days, but he'll come home and he'll just airdrop. So at random times I get these airdrop collection of memes, and they're like current event memes, called, TV show memes, and he finds the best ones. So good, bad, ugly, or weird. I laugh so hard I cry about memes pretty regularly. He's good. He's good at those.
I'm gonna have to get my face page account back so I can see some of his memes. Yeah, what was it on TikTok, Jessica?
It was like, I can't even, I laugh at so many TikToks, like so many hours of the day. It's kind of crazy and sad how it's like TikTok is right next to me when my homework is crazy, right? But it was one of those TikToks that points out the things that we see, but we really don't pay attention to. Okay, for an example, one of them was like, people who fix they stab their bowl like 5 times before they sit down or something like that. It's like, I don't know. It was like one of those things where we know it happens, but we don't notice it's happening. And they pointed out, and yeah, I was just crying like crazy. I'm one of those very gullible people.
I saw that. Excellent. Anyone else?
My husband is deathly scared of porcelain dolls because of the Annabelle movie, and I have an old one that looks just like her, and so I will randomly put it in different places. And the last time he about fell down the stairs because he came right up the stairs, and I had her sitting at his face level.
I'm pretty close to being this is the moment. Because I think the last time I saw the video that made me laugh that hard, I almost cried, was the cats and the cucumbers thing. I don't know why that kills me, but every time watching cats try to get away from the cucumbers, but now suddenly I have a picture of your husband and a porcelain dog. But I don't know the Annabelle reference. What is Annabelle a movie? Brooklyn looked up like, what, you don't know Annabelle? What's wrong with you?
It's about a possessed doll.
Yeah, it's a movie?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it like a new one, or am I just one of many movies?
There's an older one, and then it's actually based off of supposedly a true story. The doll's up in a museum.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, and it occasionally escapes too. Like, I know a couple of months ago they said that Annabelle escaped. I don't know if they found her again or what, but we got some new movies coming in a couple of years. I bet you that, because where's she?
Okay. What then is the funniest thing you've seen on campus?
Oh, I've got one. I've got a funny one. So I was taking a tour, and there was I can't exactly remember because it was before COVID. But I was taking someone on a tour and we were going past the science and technology building and I was like, yeah, they have snakes as pets and they have this and that and whatever. And then we saw like some geese walk by and the parents were like, oh man, you guys have geese. I'm like, yeah, it's a parking ticket. If you hit them, please don't hit them. We have to buy a new one. And anyway, as we were saying that, one of the dads was like walking by one and he stepped and pooped and he slipped. He didn't fall, but he just slipped and was like, and then the goose, like it scared the goose and the goose puffed up its chest, tried to fight him. We had to get out of that situation very fast. But that was the funniest thing I've seen on campus.
Oh yeah.
During the snowstorm, it was actually funny that the RAs and the BLV residents were having a snow fight, and Callie really overpowered us guys. That was kind of crazy. Callie kind of cold with the snowball fights, man. She got a lot of students over there, but that was really fun and it was funny. So because we weren't expecting that. It was kind of crazy, but it was really fun.
Okay, so next question. I'd love to have my own personal blank, fill in the blank. I'd love to have my own personal.
I would love to have my own personal tiny house in my backyard.
Yeah, why do you want a tiny house so you can escape?
Yeah, yes. I like the quiet and I love my family, but quiet is not always in abundance at my house. So I would like my own like woman cave, woman tiny house in my backyard. I know that's extravagant, but it'd be fun.
Abbie she shed. I like it.
Yeah.
I like
I like my own personal movie theater. I love watching movies. I can do that all day.
Yeah.
My own personal day for myself, one day a week, or at least one day a month, maybe.
No, be selfish. Have it one day a week.
Yeah, I've got 3 kids and my husband's pretty much a kid too. So I'll just one day I don't do anything for anybody but just sit.
I like it. I like it.
We were talking about this last night. I would like to have my own personal art studio. Just not just the one where you paint and draw and stuff, but also like the photo shoot kind and everything like that. And we were like describing it down to like the floor, like plans and everything. But yeah, like it has to have a window because last night when it was raining and thundering and we were playing music and it was LED lights, y'all, it was just woo energy. Okay. But yeah, that's something that I wish I had.
I like the trust fund. I was thinking money. I was thinking assistant, right? Those are the 2 places I went. I need more money, but my own person. Initially I thought valet, but I was like, no, better than valet. I want my own personal assistant.
That's a good one.
I want my own personal Tyler Garney. I want Tyler to actually only work just for me. That would rock.
Bless your heart. Good one.
I would get so much done, Tyler.
Maybe we can talk after this meeting.
Fair enough. All right.
There's always another.
In the time that we have left, and we'll turn it back to Abbie. Abbie, if you would talk about your research, what you do, how you do it, why you do it, I think that would be a fine way to end this.
Okay, yeah, sure. I would love to. I have sort of a captive audience for this. So my research largely focuses in a couple of areas. One is critical discourse analysis, and it really ties into that area kind of merges. So critical discourse analysis is a research methodology and a paradigm that considers the power of language, because language has power and meaning, and it's implicit in all of the ways that we use language, the spoken and the written word. And so that really got me thinking. There are two scholars outside of my discipline, that Norman Fairclough and T.J. Van Dijk, who really are credited with coming up with the idea of critical discourse analysis. And this is the capitalized version of critical discourse analysis, because there's discourse analysis that's lower. It's not capitalized, and I can split hairs for you about that all day long, but we don't need to. That's going to make people's eyes like just glaze over. So, but Van Dijk and Fairclough were really, and Van Dijk still works a lot. He produces, he's a European scholar, and he still produces a ton of work. I think he's at a university in the Netherlands right now. But it's all about looking at the way that power is exerted, and biases are either propitiated or recognized through the power of language. And so even looking at advertisements, one of his most recent works that I looked at was looking at advertisements that were published or printed all over the United Kingdom in their metro system or their underground. And so it's really interesting work. And for me, it sort of looked at the learning standards in Texas. We have a Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. And so as a government teacher, part of the research that I did for my dissertation was looking at the newly revised learning standards. So that's Texas Education Code. Our state legislature creates or approves the learning standards, and they use an administrative body, the State Board of Education, to administer and oversee and produce those learning standards with the input of community members, educators from K-12 and higher education for different discipline areas. And so back in the the fall and spring of 2009, 2010, they first rewrote with committees of educators, and every committee had to have a community member, the social studies standards. And what they did was they took a lot of diversity out of the curriculum, which wasn't super diverse to begin with. And then they also inserted a lot of very conservative ideology into the curriculum. It's very heavily biased. And so I just wanted to talk about the impact and look at discourse analysis and see how that created a power structure that had the potential to make people feel other than or second-class citizens because they weren't included in the curriculum, or their particular lens or point of view wasn't even really considered in the curriculum. And so that was sort of my first work into discourse analysis. I did a follow-up when they revised the state standards again with a different set of committees that rewrote the standards in a different state board of education, because their political leanings heavily factored into, and just some of their own personal biases heavily factored into the way that they edited those standards. And so the State Board of Education in Texas is an elected position. So you had, the first time they revised the curriculum, they had committees in 2010 that were made up of history, government, poli-sci professors from different institutions, teachers, and then they all have to have one community member. And so those groups produced standards, and they were sent to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education heard testimony on them. The Board of Education in Texas is made up of 15 different districts that are elected typically in May when we elect school board members. But if you voted in November, you saw there were some Board of Education members that were on the ballot as well. But those people don't have to have anything to do with education. And so the guy who was appointed by then Governor Rick Perry back in 2009 to be the president of the Board of Education, he was a dentist. So he didn't really have a lot of business going through and editing the standards for social studies, but he did, and so did some of his other colleagues who were all also not necessarily, some of them were lawyers and just different community members. But my stance, and the reason why critical discourse analysis was an appropriate methodology, is because the learning standards are mandated to be taught in public schools across Texas. And because they're a political mandate, they have an implicit power structure. And there's a power structure that's created between students and teachers across the state of Texas. And Texas has the second largest population of K-12 students in the nation, second only to California. And our curriculum is mandated, and our textbooks are mandated at the state level, kindergarten through 12th grade, whereas in California, it's only kindergarten through 8th grade. And then there's a lot of freedom and leniency and choice. So not all of the same high schools in California have to use the same textbooks, but that is true in Texas. So the state of Texas, even though it's the second largest state population of K-12 students, is the highest, it's the largest consumer of textbooks. And this is also why our state standards matter, because what is in our state standards, because we're the largest consumer of textbooks in the country, that gets trickled down into textbooks across the United States. So when there's inequity, when there's obvious bias, when there are power structures created in our state standards, you're going to have a trickle effect that's going to go across the United States as a whole. And that's something that we should be concerned about. And that's something that we should talk about, good or bad. It's something that needs to be recognized and acknowledged. And for a long time, it hasn't really been recognized and acknowledged. And so I did a follow-up research project on that, another discourse analysis, to look at some of the interest groups, because there's one interest group that was founded in the 1960s in East Texas by the Gablers. And they have, for the last 50 years, it's called the Equal Rights Foundation. And they have, for the last 50 years, become a key player in textbook selection, because they would go through and fact hunt. And so they would provide textbook companies, more than 600 or 6,000, it's a wide variety depending on the subject area, but they point out all of these inaccuracies that they find in textbooks. And so they started out as a housewife and an employee who worked for Exxon. Norma and her husband, I think Fred was his name. And he eventually retired early from ExxonMobil, and they made this their life's work out of their house. But they also had a very, very biased political slant to their perspective, which, there are a lot of people who have biased political slants, and that's not necessarily good or bad thing. But what is bad is when it's only one side of the story gets told. And that's when you get an inaccurate and incomplete picture of what's really going on in our history and our culture as a state and a nation. And so that's one of the things about having a free and educated public. A backbone of our democracy is that the idea that you have all of these different ideas presented to people, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. And sometimes the way that we grow as humans and as intellectuals is that we have exposure to ideas that make us uncomfortable, that we don't necessarily agree with, but we think about them and we consider them and take them into account. So anyways, I looked at that. Another thing that I'm looking at is teacher self-efficacy, because self-efficacy is the feeling of competence and competence that we have in our ability to complete tasks. That's a very short, watered down explanation. It's largely based off the work of Bandura. And so that self-efficacy is important to any field. But in education, we have reached a point in our nation's history across the United States where people who've been in education for a very long time are hitting retirement age. We have high attrition rates. The average person in the United States will stay in the classroom about 5 years. And in the South, in the southern region of the United States, it's even less. It's about 3 years. And so unless we start considering what we can do to help build self-efficacy so that teachers want to stay in the profession, we're doing our school children a disservice. Because when you have an experienced teacher over an inexperienced teacher, the experienced teacher tends to have more success with all of their students. And there's just a lot of research that supports why that is. It doesn't mean that all teachers that have been in the classroom for 30 years are good, or that teachers that have been in the classroom for 3 years aren't good. We have produced some teachers in the community right now at A&M Texarkana that haven't been in the classroom, more than 3 years, and they're doing a phenomenal job. But overall, we don't want to keep losing those teachers that are really good. It's not a benefit to our students, and it's not a benefit to the profession. So I'm interested in looking at why there's an established body of work that says we have this attrition problem, that we don't keep teachers in the field in the long term. And so why is that? And what can we do to support building efficacy? And then the third thing, I think, which all of my research strands, as different as they might seem, they all tie together, because I like to look at policy analyses. The state of Texas, the legislature, every time they meet every 2 years, an odd numbered years, they drive what goes on in K-12 classrooms. And the legislature is not necessarily made up of educators. In fact, our current commissioner of education is not an educator, does not have a background in education, has a background as a school board member, which is an elected position. And so when you have all of these policymakers and these decision makers that are sort of writing your future, creating your budget, telling you how much they aren't going to support you, but they've never been in a classroom other than to be as a student. And there's a vast difference between sitting in a classroom as a student and as a teacher. And there's so much that's, when you only have the role or the perspective of a student, you don't understand what's going on. So I'm looking at interpretive policy analysis. That's one of my current projects that I've been working on for at least a year and a half now. But House Bill 3 was a record piece of legislation that was passed in the last legislative session, 2019, and a lot of it is often referred to as the teacher raise bill, but it did more than provide teacher raises. And by the way, they only funded those teacher raises for 2 years. So, you know, some school districts have given raises, but now the school districts have to figure out how to pay for those because they were unfunded mandates past 2 years. But also within that House Bill 3, it's 374 pages of legislation that didn't cover just teacher raises. It covered the science of teaching reading, new standardized testing for certification, but also for students, new policies and decisions about blacklisting and special education. And so it's just this wide body of legislation that impacts K-12 education and teacher preparation programs across the state. But when you look, and part of the thing about interpretive policy analysis is that it's not just analyzing, you know, what is in the policy, but it's analyzing the way that different communities and different members of the community interpret the policy. So for educator preparation programs, they're going to interpret that policy one way as it affects their programs. The general public in Texas is going to interpret it in a different way because it was, again, known as the teacher raise bill. So most people just thought, oh, that's teacher raises and it's not going to impact, but it required reading academies, and there's so much work that has had to be done to meet the requirements of that bill. And then you have policymakers who are just going to go credit claim and say, look, we did this, we got raises for teachers, we're raising the standards here, you know, in terms of reading, we're going to do all of these things. And we're going to, as the way our state legislature views education is this sort of neoliberal perspective of like, we're going to create little citizens and workers. And that's the point of an education. And so it's just a really interesting perspective to see how different people interpret the same policy. And that's where I am. So I'm going to stop because I have 2 minutes and then I'll leave like a room for one question if you don't ask one that's too long and I talk forever.
Questions? I am really glad that I sent you an email that gave you the link, not knowing that you had read the need to know that said, we're not doing any of this. Because I think this is the biggest collection of folks that we've had, and it was enthralling. Thank you, Abbie. Very much appreciate it. And I think it's always a cool thing to hear, you know, also the other stuff that you do. I know the work you do to try to help students. I know the work that you do in those ways, but to hear the scholarship work that you're also doing is edifying and terrific ways. And go get them, by the way. Bring some sanity to this stuff. I'll remind everybody that we do Faculty Friday every time at noon. Next week, we'll actually have a twofer. We'll end up with nursing at noon, and then another session at 1 o'clock with, I'll spit it out, sociology and Kim Murray, who got actually canceled during the Snowmageddon. So we'll actually have 2 next Friday. We always do mix and mingle on Mondays, which is a point where people can ask questions, find out what's happening on campus, those types of things. And then always Who's Up Wednesday. And Who's Up Wednesday, I believe, will be the provost office. So our new provost will be chance to meet her, find out the folks that work in her office, and it's possible that CBET will also be joining them because we lost CBET during the Snowmageddon as well. At any rate, the Ponzi scheme still in effect. If you've come, you've enjoyed yourself, coerce, convince, try to get other people to come do this. It is a good time. I think you'll learn something about yourself, about others, and what's going on in our campus. So thank you all, and I will see you next time. Abbie, especially, thank you.
Thank you for having me.